Hi everyone, welcome to lesson 7. So in today's lesson what we're going to be doing is learning all about how to actually write more information to our Firebase database and also how to use information in our Firebase database to be able to help with things like selecting countries and that sort of stuff. Okay, so the next stage of our app is to create once the user has logged in, to create a user profile. To do that, what I've done is create a page, user profile page, and I've created this using AI. So in case you've forgotten, the easiest way is just go to where all the pages are, click the plus button, and go create with AI, and then put a prompt in. So for this, the prompt I use to create this particular page is ask for create profile page. I want to mention I want a last name, first name, date of birth, okay, and a gender with a radio button. I did specify radio button, and I also specified drop down list for selecting country and drop down list for selecting state, and a create profile button at the end. Okay, so they're pretty easy to create. Now, the first step now that we've got our form and it's basically doing what we want to do, what we now, or it looks okay anyway, what we now want to do is we want to create the places in which we can collect data from this to put into the Firebase, and then also places that we can draw information from for selecting countries and state. To do this, we need to go over to Firebase. And in advance of the video, I've already created these fields because it's tedious to watch me do that. Okay, so basically what I've done is create a first name field, a last name field, a date of birth field, a gender field, a country field, and a state field. Okay, so for all of these, except for the date field, they're all strings. Okay, and for the date, because we know a date is coming in, we need a data type and we need date selected. Now, if you accidentally create additional fields, and let's say you incorrectly put the data type in, you cannot change it. You need to delete the document here, or the field, and then you need to re-enter it. But not a big deal. Now, just so you're clear what actually happens, we've got some open, whoops, wrong place, open files here. And so what happens is when we add these fields to the data structure, what happens is any existing information you have here, basically they just get added as columns and they're just blank in that area. So you can go back and populate something if you add things later on. So this makes it helpful in cases where you want to do upgrades on your app and you've forgotten to do something, or you want to add a new feature or whatever. Now the second things I've done here is I've now created some second collections, not just a user collection. We now have a country data and we have a country state data. Now these have been collected, so just for the purposes of what we're doing, just one with country name and then one with the country name and the state name. And just for the purposes of the information today, what I've done is just create just a couple of countries, Australia and New Zealand, and Australia and New Zealand with a couple of states. So there's 5 entries. And this is just practice data. Now, obviously, if you were wanting to make a full serious app, then what you would do is you would go and upload via a CSV the country name. And just on that too, so if we go across to here, with your uploading a CSV, just a couple of things to be aware of. Number one is CSVs, when you're uploading it, what happens is if you need to save an Excel file or a Google Doc or whatever it is as a CSV, and then secondly, you need to make sure that in the first row of the data, that the name matches precisely to the field name. Now, if you don't have an exact match, what happens is that it will still accept the addition of the CSV, the data from the CSV in here, but what it will do is create additional fields. Now the problem, so basically you just want to do you just want to make sure that name is precise if you've got an existing data structure that you want to create. The second thing just to be aware of is that when you're uploading a CSV, if you're in a screen, and I think my screen is too small, it sometimes will give you a preview of the first 10 documents. Sometimes if your screen is too small, if I'm filming this on a laptop rather than on a desktop, if the screen's too small, sometimes you won't be able to actually upload the CSV. There is a limit on the screen size. I couldn't tell you what that exact screen size is, but just be aware of that. Okay, so now that we've got our data structures in place, the next step we need to do is we need to prepare the various fields in here. So we're going to do just go through them step by step. Okay, so when we've created the fields, we've got a first name, and this is a text field. You can see by here it's a text field designed for entry, and then the last name is the same. Now they're absolutely fine, so I don't need to actually do anything. The only thing I have done is I have renamed them, and the reason I rename things is because it makes it easier to identify them on this when you are picking out items for actions and that sort of thing. Now the next one on the list, and this often happens with AI, is there is a last name text field. It's got the wrong name actually. It's a date of birth. We'll just call that. Now the problem, what they've done is that the AI, and this often happens, is they will put in a text field which is actually not appropriate for what we're trying to do. So if we're entering a date, we can get the user to enter, because this type of widget allows for someone to manually enter the data to enter the date, which is fine. But that's actually often not what you want. And the reason for this is you really want to use a date picker because the issues can be that if, for example, you're in a country like the US, they have a different order to what we have in Australia for the way dates are displayed. So they display the month first, then the day, and then the year, whereas we do day, month, and year. So if you want to make sure that the data quality is good, it's much better to produce a date picker to make sure it's absolutely clear. And secondly is that the date picker also gives you the right format for your database in the background, which we've set as a date and time. Now to do this, so in this case, the AI has actually selected the wrong type of widget to collect this. So we're going to add a different widget in to do this. So I'm going to add in a container, and I often use containers for this activity. So I need to reformat this. So I'm going to make this fill in the maximum size, and I'm going to give it a height of 50, which I think will roughly match what's there elsewhere. Okay, so we've got our container. Now within the container, we want to put some text in. And again, to match it, we're going to bring it down to the middle end of the box, and then we're also going to add some padding, which will roughly match it to what's there. Now I could take it a step further and go in and work out exactly what the color is and adjust it and make sure everything's exactly the same, which is what you should do if you're creating a proper app. In this case, because it's a demo, I'm not going to worry too much about that. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we want to now create a date picker. Now what we want the user to do is we want them to click anywhere on this container and then for a date picker to appear. So it's an action that we're interested in. So we click an action and we can add an action. And if you go down to widget interface, there is a date and time picker. Okay, so that's all good. Now the date and time picker, just there are a few options because we haven't done this sort of thing before, is there is date and time and time. We're only interested in date in this case, which is the default. And you may also want to have some limits that you place on for the minimum and maximum date. And the other default is that it only allows future dates, which is not appropriate for what we're doing here. we only want to allow past dates and we want to disallow future dates because obviously the date of birth can't happen in the future. Okay, so that is the setup for our date picker, and we'll show you when we go into test mode what that looks like. Okay, now the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we give because what happens is the date picker will appear. It's just like a date picker you've seen in many different apps where you click the day and the month or whatever, and it will put the date in. But we want to make sure the user is aware that they have successfully picked the date, and this is what you use this text for. So what we want to do there is that we want to go here, and what we want to do is we want to make that value dynamic. And what we want to do is this is a widget state, so this is a part of the UI or the interface, and you'll see that it gives you an option for a date picked. So that means that we're setting the value that the user picks as the what appears in this page. Now there are a couple of things to be aware of when setting up something like this. Is firstly, unlike these text up here, which allow you to put hint text in, we can't really do that with a text box. It's either the value of the text is what the value of the text is. So what I'm going to do to mimic what's in the boxes above is I'm going to have select date of birth. Okay, so when a date is not picked, this is what will appear. Now the last thing with date picked, and this is sort of the finicky things with Flutterflow, and there's always lots of things like this where it's not obvious immediately where the date format needs to be, and you'll find that if you don't select an appropriate date format, you'll get something you don't want, which in this case the default is the date plus time, and of course if you're not collecting time you just get this bunch of zeros after, which is not what we want. So we can fix that by putting in date and time format. So I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to select an option, and the option I'm going to choose is this one. And the reason I'm choosing this one is because if we look at the dates here, it's not obvious if the user is from a different country as to whether it's the 6th of June or the 9th of June or the 6th of September. So whereas something like this, that's why I choose it, is what I'm going to go for. Okay, so once we do that, what you end up with is you get your select date of birth, which is what we want the user to see. When they click on here, the date picker will come up, and whatever value is selected will be assigned to this text. So that's all set up. All right, now the next one we're going to do this in two parts, is what to do with the drop-down lists. So in the case of the drop-down lists, what we are doing, sorry, I'm just getting rid of, because this is the second or third time I've tried to film this video and kept making mistakes along the way, and I left something in I'd done previously. Anyway, so basically what we want to do with this drop-down list is we want to pull out from the back end, the Firebase, is we want to pull out a block of information, which would be the names of the countries. Now to do that, what we can do, and so far we've used properties and we've used actions, and today what we're going to be using is backend query. So backend query, what that does is it assigns the query to the widget so that you can pull information and it's related to that widget. Okay. Now, if you have, for example, several widgets within a widget, if you assign a backend query to that parent widget, all of the query will be available for all the child widgets within the widget, if that makes sense. Okay, so to do that, what we can do is add a query, and the query that we're going to add is a collection query. So we're querying one of the tables. Now the one I'm interested in is the country data, which has the list of just Australia, in our case just Australia and New Zealand. So I want to select that. Now the default is a single document, which is fine in some cases. So for example, if you're searching for a specific country, you can put in a filter to find a single country. However, in our case, we're not interested in that. We want a list of documents. Okay, so we're going to have a list of countries. Now, if we wanted to eliminate this or partially eliminate this list, we could apply a filter. So we could, for example, have it either searching for a specific name, like we just mentioned, or part of a name, or excluding on different things. But basically, the filter process works the same way as if you were applying logic to and in the actions area where if this does this or if that is equal to that, and then you'd set your values. So that's fairly straightforward. Now, in addition to that, we can order the output. So I'm going to order the output so that's in alphabetical order, which is going to make it easier for the user to be able to collect the information. So once we've done that, we've now got a query associated with it. Now, the widget tree, just to show you what happens, the widget tree here will show you a little orange bar, which is telling you that this particular dropdown has a backend query associated with it. Okay, so we can do those sort of things. But so far, what we've done is we have kind of, the analogy we like to use is it's kind of like taking an appliance and plugging it into an electrical socket. So we've plugged it in, the power is ready to go, but the appliance is still not working because we've plugged it in, but we haven't turned on the power to get the data. Okay, so the next step we need to do once we've done that is we need to go back to our properties and we need to set some properties to be able to select that. So the way that you would do that is, and I'm going to remove this because again I forgot to take it out, is if we have define options, okay, so you'll notice each one of these options has an orange thing. So if you had one particular option coming from one place and another option coming from another place, you can do it. Or if it's the total options, which is what we want, then what we could do is select the orange list. Now this is where this query comes into play because we've got this country data document, which is the one we've queried on, is now appearing in our list as an option. So that now makes it available for us. So once we've selected that, then what we can do is that we can choose the lists. Now this is where it's a little bit not so intuitive in that what we actually want to do if we want to display a bunch of lists is that we want to select a map list. So we want to map the items and make them appear in the drop-down. Okay, now once you have that, this is the point at which you really do need to pay close attention because this is one of these things that as you get more familiar with Flutter Flow, this is where you can go around in circles a little bit going, oh, how do you do that again? So if I start, the intuitive thing is just click on these sort of documents and you'll just go around and around in circles, adding more and more information, and that's not what we want to do. So what we actually want to do is we want to select on the item in the list, okay, and that will allow us to get the document property, okay, and then we need to select one of these options. So if in this case we've only got the one field in there, but which is the country name, but if we had multiple fields, it would allow you to choose any one of those fields. And you'll see there's two other options. Document exists is fairly obvious in that if you wanted to search a database to see whether a document appeared, so for example, if you wanted to make sure that the user did not enter duplicate data, you could say this, you could have a search on this saying this document already exists, and then stopping them doing it. In our case, we wanted to just display the value, and the other option is to use the reference. Now the reference, we'll go back to the database in a second. I'll show you what that reference is, what it looks like in Firebase. But anyway, what we've got is we've got our country name, okay, and so that now is ready to have our drop-down lists. Oh, and we're not happy, so I've absolutely stuffed this up. I'll have to do it again because I was talking too much and not doing this properly, so let's quickly do it again. Okay, map lists, enter there, get documents, and get reference, and that should be right. Okay, so now we have that. So now what I'm going to, and before we go and do the test mode, I'll just show you what a reference looks like. So every time that a document is created in a table, it doesn't matter what the table is, there is an ID. So that ID can be used, so you can collect a reference, and that gives you a reference to a document. And you would use this in cases where you might have many fields over to the side, and you want to access several of those fields. So you might say, I'm not interested in just the one field, I'm interested in the total document so that I can actually access it. So that's what a reference is used for. Okay, so let's go to the instant reload. Let's make sure that everything is working so far. Now I've purposely left the second drop down to do separately, which we'll do once we've make sure everything's working. Once it decides to come up. Okay, so we have all of this stuff. Now the select date, we wanted to make sure that was working. Okay. And we forgot to take the select date out. So this, we actually did it over here, select date of birth, sorry. Got to take it out. Once I click on there, up comes our date selector. And you'll notice that it has it in light grey, so we cannot pick dates forward of today's date. So we'll just pick one behind. Okay, and once we do that and we click OK, we should see the 5th of June, and it's in the format that we want. So that's working as we would like. Fantastic. Okay, the next one is we have our options, Australia and New Zealand. And for those particular options, that's what we want. And if we select that, then it appears in the drop down, which is what we want to happen. Okay, so that's great. That works perfectly. Now the last one we're going to do before we actually write this data is we want this state province one filled in. Now the reason I'm doing this one last is because it works much the same way as what we just did, except that in this case what we want to have happen is we want the user to select a country, and then once they've selected the country, we want to give them only options for states within that country. So obviously what we want to prevent is the user, from example, picking Australia and then selecting South Island and New Zealand, because that data doesn't make any sense. So to limit that, what we actually want to do now is we want to do the same process that we did previously, except we want to do a query, but this time we want to control the query. So what we want to do now is we're going to query a collection, and this time we're going to query a different one. We're going to query the state and state data. And once we have that, we want to get a list of documents like we did before. Okay, and this time we want to put a filter on it. So we only want to show up things that are in the country that has been selected in the previous user box. Okay, so we're going to, so the user is going to select a country name. So we can select country name, and we want it to be equal to, okay, and then we want to identify the widget state in which it was chosen, which is the first drop down. Okay, so once they select that, okay, we can confirm it, and that will give us a list which can only contain states of the country that has been selected. Okay, so once we have that, then everything else is exactly the same, but what we're creating is a dynamic drop-down list that is dependent. What appears in this is dependent upon what has been selected in the previous drop-down list. Now to do that, the process is exactly the same. We're interested in country state data this time because that is the drop-down that is the query that is associated with this particular drop-down. And we want to map our choices, or map the list of documents going to appear, and we want to get the document property. And this time what we want is we want the state name, not the country name, and then we can confirm. Okay, and we'll confirm, and we'll do a test again. Okay, and we'll hit the instant reload. Okay, so here we go. And the thing we want to test is, clicked on it, there we go. So let's say we pick Australia, and then our list here is going to come up with only states. So I only entered 3 in there, Victoria. Now if I go again, and this time I select New Zealand, okay, then you get the choice of the North Island, South Island. So that's how you can create a dynamic user interface that responds to what the user chooses and gives them options based upon that. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do, and I'm probably not going to spend too long on this, is now that we've got all of our information ready to go, what we need to do is we need to write that information to our database. Okay, now if I'm doing this properly, which I'm not going to in this case, I would have a bunch of conditional actions on making sure that I'm forcing the user to enter all information before I write that data to my database. So for example, I want to make sure they're giving me a name, a date of birth, and I'd get rid of that, of course, date of birth, selected gender, selected country, selected state, and only then would I allow it to write. So that would be basically creating, in my case, sorry, get back here, is creating a bunch of conditional actions saying, well, have they set the information? No, they haven't. Let's send them a message to say, give us the name. Have they set the last name? No, they haven't. Give us a message. Okay, now what we're going to do now though is I'm just going to set up delete all of these things. Okay, and what I'm going to do is set up the writing of the information to the database. Okay, so what we need to do here is we need to go to a backend database, and what we want to do is we want to write to Firestore, and we don't want to create a document because we've already created it. So remember, this is for a authenticated user that is already logged in, and now we're adding extra information to their record. So it's actually an update the document. So what we need to do, and this is where this reference that we were talking about before comes in, we need to identify what that reference is. Okay, so in our case, what they have consistently throughout Flutterflow is they have the authenticated user. So we have that record already in place that we can access. So this is a really cool feature of, makes it really easy. So we're interested in the reference for the current authenticated user. Okay, so we've done that. Cool. So we know which record it's then going to be assigned to. So we're making sure it goes into the right document. And then the next step is that we want to add all of our fields that are going to be displayed. And now the reason I'm, by the way, just clicking that, even though we're not interested in email and display name and all that sort of thing, is if I delete them, so if I remove that, what happens is it will just give me back that. So you've got to basically put every field in here and then delete the ones you don't want. Okay, so we'll do all of that in a second. Okay, we're nearly there, and then country and state. Okay, right. So let's clean this up a little bit now. So we don't need email, we don't need display name, we don't need photo URL, don't need that one. Create time. We don't want the phone number. So this is all information we now need. So we now need to tell it how to get that. Okay, so what we would do is we can go to the field, we're naming the field it's going to go to. Okay, we could either enter a specific value if it was always going to be the same value, or in my case, we're going to enter it from a variable. Okay, and that variable is whatever value they have entered into the sheet. Okay, so you'll see that this is the text box attached to the page. So we can just click that and add that. All right, so you do exactly the same thing for last name. Okay, and that would be exactly the same. So I'm not going to worry too much about that one because it's pretty much the same one as what we've just done. Okay, then you've got date of birth. Now, date of birth, again, it's from a variable. Now, in this case, it's a widget state, again, but this time it's the pick date. So it's the date that the person has picked. Okay, so that's what that would be. That's just slightly different to just pulling it out from a widget. It's actually a value that's being picked in the background. Okay, now for our gender, what we need to do, and this makes radio buttons make life pretty easy, is we can get it from a variable. Okay, and hopefully our widget state with our variable. Actually, it's not appearing. Oh, I'd probably have to see why that's the case. I won't worry too much about it. Okay, and then the last thing we want to do, and the country and the state are exactly the same, in that what we want to do is we're just selecting the selected value from the widget, which is the drop down in this case. So whatever the user selects, and that's going to be, the first drop down would be the country, and then the second one would be the state. All right, so that's pretty much what you'd do. You'd save it and close it. I haven't set, or that's why there's an error. I haven't saved and set it, and this video has already gone long enough. But basically, that's how you would create a backend call. And obviously, once you've got all of that right, you would then run a test mode, click your test it, make sure everything's working, and then basically just double check that in your actual user table that everything is going into the user table as expected. Okay, so that's pretty much how you can write more information from Firebase into Firebase and also grab information from Firebase for the purposes of making it life easy for the user. All right, I hope that all makes sense. Give it a crack. Make sure you're taking your time, trying everything as you're going along, setting it up properly, not the way I've done it with a few of the things where I've taken some shortcuts with actions and that sort of stuff. But give it a whirl, and we'll see you in the next lesson. Cheers, guys. Bye.